In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at how to paint urban themed bases. Hey everyone, welcome to my first tutorial. So right here is a completed base, so you can clearly see what sort of effect you can get very quickly and very easily. The first colour we'll be using is Seraphim Sepia, but in preparation we've applied a very basic zenithal highlight. To do this, we simply sprayed the bases black and then very lightly dusted them from above with a white spray. In this case I used grey Seer. This creates a really nice transition, leaving the recesses dark and creating a natural highlight. Now starting with the sepia wash, we need to coat the entire base, get into all the nooks and crannies. Don't worry if you hit any other details for now, as we'll go back to them later on. These bases that I'm using in this tutorial are from a company called Unreal Wargaming Studios, and as you can see, they are excellent resin casts. Next we're going to be using Drakenhof Nightshade and Biel-Tan green. This is going to give the rubber a little bit more colour variation and a bit more interest, so it won't just be all one solid colour. We're going to be adding small batches here and there just at random. Once the bases are dry, we can clearly see that really nice subtle variation that those green and blue washes give us. And now we can move on to our first stage of dry brushing. For this stage, we'll be using Ushabti bone, and I'll be using a medium dry brush from Citadel. For dry brushing, we start by dipping the end of the brush in some paints, then wiping most of the excess paint off in a tissue. And now, to apply the paint, we gently flick the brush back and forth in all directions across the entire base. We can afford to be quite heavy here, covering the entire surface with this colour, but leaving the darker colour in the recesses. After this layer of Ushabti bone, we can see really nicely how much it's brightened up that stonework. For this urban or industrial look, we're going to go for a slightly more grey tone. And for this next step, we're going to add a slightly lighter dry brush of Longbeard grey. Any off-white grey colour should be fine here. See the difference that that pass of grey is added. It shifts the colour slightly more of a neutral tone. Now once all the bases have had Longbeard grey applied, it's now time for the final highlight. For this highlight, we're going to very lightly dry brush the base with a pure white, catching just the highest points of the base. This really accentuates the detail and adds more contrast to the base. And as we can see here, it's only a very light pass over the whites, but it really makes the detail pop. Next up, we're going to pick out all of the metal details, and for this, we're going to use a technical paint called Typhus Corrosion. Now what's special about this paint is that it has tiny grains of sand mixed into it, which helps to create textured and uneven surfaces. And because of these tiny grains of sand, make sure that we're using an old brush, as it's sure to get damaged. We're going to go through now and spend some time picking out all the metal parts with this paint. So looking at these bases I have here, we can see there's a nice variety of metal parts scattered throughout all the bases. So now the paint is fully dry, we can see that it's left behind a really nice, subtle texture that's perfect for dry brushing and creating a really cool rust effect. To achieve this rust effect, we're going to use a very bright orange, and in this case, we're using the Fire Dragon Bright. For applying the paints, we're going to do a mixture of some very light dry brushing using a small dry brush, as well as stippling some larger surfaces. We can do this by gently stabbing the brush against the metal parts, slowly building up the vibrant orange colour. Here we can see how by adding that bright orange to the metal, we've created a really nice, quick, effective rust effect. We're now going to take this one step further, and we're going to highlight with Runefang steel. There are a couple of different ways where we can apply this silver. The first is by gently stippling along the sharpest edges, implying there are scratches and chips, creating the illusion of an uneven surface. The key thing to remember here is that less is more. Just like the final white highlight for the stonework earlier, this is a simple finishing touch, and we don't want this colour to dominate the rest of the metal. The other way where we can sell this metal effect on larger, flat areas is by very gently flicking our brush across them with almost no paint on. This is very similar to dry brushing. And by doing this, it will catch a few of those grains of sand left over from Typhus Corrosion and give us a really nice rusted metal effect. highlights are silver and the metallic parts are done. I think that these dark rusted components scattered across the entire base contrast really nicely against that light beige off-white colour that we've used for the rest of the base. The last step in order to finish off these bases is to paint the rooms a dark colour to tidy them up. I prefer black for this, so I'm going to use Abaddon black and apply at least 2 thin coats to get a nice smooth coverage. And here we are after a couple of coats of black. It's important to varnish the bases with a couple of light sprays of matte varnish. For this, I've used Testors Dullcote. This seals the colour nicely so it's less likely to chip off. This is particularly important when we're using resin bases like we are here, as paint is more likely to chip off resin than plastic, especially the black rims when you pick them up all the time in the game. You can see here how this technique scales up to larger bases, and they all fit together cohesively. This technique can easily apply to other models, just like there's a magnifier from the Sisters of Battle range. As well as these statues that I printed out. Finally, here's what it looks like with the model attached to the base. I think the natural colours we've used in the base really complement most colour schemes. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Tag me on Instagram at Forgeplay if you've had a go yourself, as I'd love to see your work. I'll leave you now with some more shots of the rest of the finished bases. Go and enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in another video.